Dr. Suad Abdul Khabeer. Dr. Yes, give it up. Dr. Suad Abdul Khabeer is a scholar, artist, activist, originally from Brooklyn, New York. She is curator of Umi's Archive, a multimedia project documenting Black and Muslim histories, and co-founder of Sapelo Square, a digital media and education collective on Black Muslims in the US. Trained as an anthropologist, Suad's first book, Muslim Cool, Race, Religion, and Hip-Hop in the United States, is a field-defining study of Islam and hip-hop that examines how intersecting ideas of Muslimness and Blackness challenge and reproduce meanings of race in the United States. Suad is an associate professor of American culture at the University of Michigan. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, peace. Greetings to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us to what I believe is actually a very historic panel. I think the idea of this intersection of race and religion, of being Black and Muslim and being creative, I think there's a long history of that, but we don't get a lot of acknowledgement of it. So I'm really excited to be here and with this esteemed panel. So what we're going to do is I am going to introduce the panelists. I'll start furthest from me, moving in, and then we're going to ask some questions, and then we'll have time for questions from the audience. So, furthest from me is Amir Collier. He's a literary manager at Color Creative, originally from Washington, D.C., by way of Atlanta. His career experience includes radio, digital, and most recently, film and TV. Amir has held positions at NFL Network, Fox Sports, FX, and Epic Records, while also assisting on productions including Really Love, Space Jam 2, DMZ, Colin in Black and White, and The Last Days of Ptolemy Gray, and many more. Next to Amir is Yucef Mays, who is a recipient of the 2022 fellowship from the New Jersey State Council on the Arts for Film. His film, Zahra and the Oil Man, premiered at the American Black Film Festival, Martha's Vineyard's African American Film Festival, and BlackStar Film Festival, and was nominated for Outstanding Short Film in the Black Reel Awards. Yucef's third film, The Mechanic Rose, is being produced by Wavelake Productions, Cinereach, and the Black Film TV Collective. Yucef is also an outreach community coordinator for CMC Express Newark, a digital storytelling hub for local creatives. Next to Yucef is Nijla Mutman, who is a writer and filmmaker from the East Bay area. She was the winner of the Grand Jury Prize for Best Screenplay at the 2014 Urban World Film Festival for her script Noor, which has continued to garner recognition from places like the Blacklist, Muslim List, and the Sundance Institute. Her debut feature film, Jinn, won the Special Jury Recognition Award for Screenwriting in 2018 at South by Southwest, was a New York Times Critics Pick, and is currently streaming on Amazon. Most recently, she has also directed episodes of some of our favorite TV shows, including Queen Sugar, Insecure, Swagger, and Wu-Tang: An American Saga. And last but definitely not least is Desha Dauchan. I didn't ask you how you say your last name. Look at that.
Yeah, that was good.
Right. Who is a San Francisco native and an alum of Howard University. I guess is that the real HU? and UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television. An award-winning filmmaker, her short film works have screened at Sundance, BlackStar, American Black, Pan-African, Urban World Film Festivals. Desha's work explores drama, folklore, and magical realism in her feature-length and television screenplays. Also a film and media studies professor at UC Irvine, her writing has found support in the Tribeca All Access Program, Film Independent Screenwriters Lab, and the Hedgebrook Screenwriters Lab. So please join me again in welcoming our panelists. Okay, so the first question really is about what got you into film? Like, what is your story, how you got into film?
I'll start. For me, I always give thanks to my auntie, Elisa Blunt-Moorhead. You know, she's always been in the audience here at BlackStar. You know, if you know her well, she's just a master curator of rooms, you know, and she was my closest, I guess, proximity to the arts. Through her, you know, I mean, she always just had the coolest people around her, coolest best friends, you know, Bradford Young, Terrence Nance, who was here yesterday, Arthur Jafa, Malik Saeed, So I always just gained like this curiosity, being a fly on the wall to a lot of things that she was doing. And even that, in that process, you know, she introduced me to BlackStar. So, you know, while I was going to Temple University right up the street, you know, I've always seen this festival kind of just blossom and always, again, just gain my, well, at least gain more momentum in my curiosity for film. So, you know, I'm here now and, you know, just grateful to be here amongst this crew too.
For me, I always loved the short story craft. Went to school for, you know, writing short stories at the New School, and I stumbled on it. I was working at an alternative school. They had some film equipment that was just sitting there collecting dust, and somebody said, "Don't you write stories?" You know, and it was like, "Make some films." And so I kind of, you know, YouTube University, you know, right? And I made a bunch of terrible films, you know, and then that's real, you know, just that hands-on training, that, you know, guerrilla filmmaking just helped me create that cinematic voice. And still just learning what my cinematic voice, but through the short story craft.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Bay Area, and when I was a kid, I always knew I wanted to be an artist. I loved singing, I loved dancing, I loved just theater, anything to do with the arts. My father took me to see Malcolm X when I think I was 10 years old at this theater in Oakland called Grand Lake Theater, and I just really responded to the way the audience embraced that film, seeing people crying and just being so moved by that film and by the performance of Denzel Washington really, I think, inspired me at that age. But it wasn't until I was a student at UC Berkeley when I was really immersed in poetry and also in documentary film photography that I knew I wanted to go further and tell stories for the screen. So I started to make my own short films and teach myself and just shoot around Oakland. And then from there, I went to film school. So it was really like a continuum of being immersed in different art forms that led me into filmmaking.
Okay, so I'm going to try not to repeat the same answer because it's really similar. I'm also from the Bay Area. Yes. But like just 8 years ahead, because the Malcolm X viewing happens when I'm in college, in my freshman year of college, and that was also kind of a pivotal moment. But if I fast forward before that, I also, as a kid, you know, I liked storytelling. I wrote little plays. I danced, I choreographed as a teenager. I had a singing group and I was writing songs as a teenager. But it wasn't until I saw Malcolm X, and I grew up on Spike Lee films, to say that. So, you know, from school days up to Malcolm X, I was being influenced by the fact that a black man could make a film about his community, you know? And so then I get to Howard, right? And I make my first project, right? I take a class and I make my first project. And back then it was 8mm film. It was like, okay, you're going to come up with an idea and you have to shoot it in camera. And so it was, you know, it was a collective of us. I think it was 4 of us in the group, and they chose my idea. I pitched my idea. I was like, I want to shoot at the Washington Monument, and I want to see this sister over here, and then I want to see the poetry, and so on and so forth. And so, one of my partners, he was sketching the things I was describing, which were storyboards, which we learned later. We didn't know what that was, but he could draw, so he would sketch them in these little squares. And we went out and we shot this piece all in one, because it's 8mm film, and we turned it in. And then you wait for it to go to the lab. And then it comes back, and I played music alongside the projection, but actually seeing the projection of what was in my mind flicker on screen for the first time in the dark, I was in love. Yeah.
Wow, these are all really powerful. I mean, from your aunt and that sort of film history, right, that she's connected to through sort of like, you know, that trial and error, trying to figure it out, and then your childhood, and Malcolm X. I think that Malcolm X is actually a cool way to think about the next question. You know, I was looking actually at your film, Yucef, Zahra and the Oil Man, and there's this scene where like the 2 brothers are like
doing this thing about, do you know the oil? And then they having this whole like real competitive thing, which as a Black Muslim person, I was like, that's very Black and that's very Muslim, right? And so it made me think about that. Like, how does, right, either whether it's Islamic beliefs or Muslim practices, how does or when or maybe why not, right, does Islamic belief, Muslim practice show up in the work or how you do your work? And you don't have to answer in order. What do you want to do? Yeah.
I mean, I think, growing up in East Orange, the Newark area, it was just important for me, like first, I'm a Christian man who grew up in a Muslim household, raised by Muslims, and so it was very important for me to just capture that essence, of Muslims in Newark. And Black people, we just come with swag wherever we are, right? Like Philly has that swag. The brothers wear their thobes, but they got their J's on, and it was very important for me just to capture those nuances, those conversations, and although they're Muslim, it's just a cultural exchange, I just, that was the fun part. That was the fun part of making this film. Like a friend of mine, like friend of mine from high school, he sell oils, and he always had his daughter with him, and so I really just thought about, as a parent, I'm a parent, I got a daughter and a son and daughter, and so just the relationship, I wanted to just show that relationship in an intimate way, and just take your child to work day, but you're outside all day, so it had to have been frustrating. So that just made me think about, what the kind of story or what can happen, in that relationship.
Don't all,
Yeah, for me, I think a lot of it comes out in wanting to get at the humanity and the complexity of especially just being a Black girl and trying to figure out who you are. But also, for me, growing up in a Muslim community, I just had never seen the fullness of that community really represented in the contemporary sense. The life, the laughter, just Muslims dancing and loving and being flawed and being just all these different things. And I just felt like with my feature, Jen, I really had to speak that truth and show that truth and show that honesty, because I think a lot of times we just don't see it. So it was really important for me to really focus on, like I said, that complexity and just all the details of being confused, of not knowing who you are, but still having like a very profound love for Islam, which I think, my inner child is very strong and led me to be able to tell that story in a truthful way and still, have it, exude such love for the community. So I think it's really important for me in all of my work to really go and look at the gray area and the area between, the hero and the villain, the bad guy and the good guy. Like, what are those areas in between where humanity exists? And that's where my representations and my portrayals of Islam come from. So I just, continue to do that in any work I do, whether there's Muslims presented or not.
I think it fits with my story too, because I actually, converted or reverted to Islam around that Malcolm X time, like in the 90s, towards the end of my Howard stay. And so I was becoming a filmmaker and becoming a Muslim kind of simultaneously, because you are in this space where you're growing and you're becoming and you're trying to figure it out, and just a lot of messaging around what I was receiving from, being at Howard and interning with the Garimas and, well, what is your story? What are you telling? What are you saying, right? So there was always this kind of directive almost, like, or a challenge to step up and what were you saying. I do feel like what may have been a little bit different about, or how I kind of bucked up against the what am I saying or what am I exploring, is that I was very into the navel gazing aspects of being a young person and wanting to explore what maybe I was going through or what someone that I knew was going through. And so thus, every film that I made thus after, from being at UCLA, it was always about a young Muslim boy is trying to find his rhythm on the djembe drum, or it's about, a young woman goes home and she's converted to Islam now, but how does she, reconnect in this difficult best friendship, now that she's different, and is she that different, or is there something that she can learn from this person that she deems to be mentally ill in her mind, And so it was all about the things that I wanted to explore, so it comes from the person. All of my stories come from the person that I want to explore, thus Muslims will appear, because that's who I'm seeing around me, that's who I'm curious about, and so it's not even very calculated. I'm not thinking about how do I want to represent this person, and which to me I felt like is a little bit of a trick bag, because then you can't get into the nuance, you can't get into the questions of, am I okay? Do I like myself? Did I make the right choice? And I think a lot of times, I converted with a lot of people. They're not all with me anymore. We're still friends, but they didn't make the journey. So people question. And so I like to get into just human stuff, human questions. And so, Muslim people have human questions too.
I mean, I'll just add real quick, it's such a lived experience. Like you said, it's just something that's very, very personal. Being on the business and representation side of it, those people that provide those green lights and resources are so far removed from that experience, you know what I mean? Like, they can't tell you what sand smells like, you know what I mean? Or like you said, just having that personal journey that you're kind of on, it sucks, because, that's where you see the results of what's out there, and that's such a misrepresentation of just like who you are as an individual and the people that you are around, you know what I mean? So, it's a lot of work to do in terms of just like how you kind of stand on your 10 and do that. But also, I guess the catch-22 behind that is just, the commerce of it all and how you gotta, strive towards that, you know what I mean? So, I don't know, it's a battle for sure.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I'm trying to pick which question to do next, because both of you did 2 points. But maybe I'll start internally and then move externally. So this question of humanity, right? You were saying, you like to be in the gray areas. You're trying to tell the human story, touching on the humanity. But, one of the things that we know, and at least, and I noticed too, as a viewer and in Muslim communities, but just in communities in general who are not usually on screens, there's a lot of pressure, I feel like, on people who make film or make stuff, right? Because they want this person to be perfect or the best representation. Representation's a trap, but like this type of thing, right? And so I'm wondering how people respond. Like, how does the communities that are represented to some extent, right, in the work you're doing, how have they responded to the work? That's the one question I had. Yeah.
I mean, so with Czar and the Oil Man, like I got a grant from Express Nord Rutgers to make the film, and so we had, part of the grant was to do community screenings, to the Muslim community and things as such, and so they responded well. Like because it was a sweet father and daughter story, it was a relief. And then also too, what was interesting, that when shown in other spaces, that, and I didn't mean it, but there's the oil man, but there's also the preacher, and and so people didn't understand how can these two different communities be in the same space, and it's like, that's the black community. Like, at Thanksgiving, you got my Aunt Tony, who's Muslim, but you got my uncle who's a pastor. So we although we're religious, we don't come, culturally we still come together. And so, but there were some while like doing marketing within the community, there was some others for school of thought because, film is images and things of that such. And so there was some pushback there, but I challenged it. I feel like we are in a war of our culture, and that we have to, press these images on, press these stories on, because who else will tell them?
I'll take it. What's the question again?
Oh, so how have Muslim audiences responded to your work?
I feel like the work that I make generally tends to leave a quiet audience, and so I'm not always sure. I'm always like a little scared, a little nervous, and because I'm not thinking first and foremost, how am I representing the Muslim community? I'm thinking about Leah Hassan in this film, and what's her truth, and what's her story, and what is she going through. And so I feel like the responses that I get are more from individuals, like kind of the quiet, like, girl, you know what I mean? Like, or even my father, not a Muslim, senior, comes to me and is like, I think I understand what she's going through. I said, well, what's she going through, Daddy? He's like, she's lost herself. Yeah, and so I'm like, okay, so to me, when it's universal, I feel like it touches the people where it's supposed to touch them. But, I think it's, and I think my work tends to resonate in a way that it's like it takes a minute to digest, and then you may reflect on what it is. But I think it's probably somewhat of a mixed bag. You're going to get like, that's not. Doesn't represent me, but I think I'm at a place where I don't think that every character is supposed to represent each of us. I think Leah Hassan has a story. I think Khalik, from one of my other films, he has a story. He's suffering with his sanity. Like that's a story. And it's more of a magically real, tale about, is he haunted or is he losing his mind? That's his story, and so, I think it depends.
Yeah, for Jen, my feature film, I received a lot of love from the Muslim audience, and I thought it's a blessing because when I was writing it, I was not really thinking like, I have to make a film that's gonna represent every Muslim and what are people gonna think. I couldn't have that on me when I'm writing because I feel like I'm like not free. And in order to write that film, I had to be free. And so when we screened the film across the country and internationally, to see Muslims in the audience be moved, laugh, and respond to the screen, just like that meant the world to me. So I'm just really thankful for that. We did a screening here at BlackStar, which was one of the best screenings I've ever had in my life. It was sold out.
I was telling her I was
so
at that
scared.
screening. I was there.
My heart is pounding in a lot of these screenings because I really, you want people to love what you do, but you don't have control. And so I think that's the beauty of a live audience, why I love theatrical screenings. I took the film to Oakland. In Oakland, that screening, and where I'm from, was like one of the most nerve-wracking because my father is in the audience, my imam from my masjid is in the audience, people I grew up with, and I was very emotional, and it was received with love, but I just, you don't know. You just don't know, and each screening I would go into, I just hoped that it would go over well, but there was a lot of love, and on Twitter, people were tweeting about it a lot, so I just appreciate that, and I didn't try to represent every Muslim. I just told my truth, and that's all I can do. So.
Yeah. Did you want to say anything?
I mean, you just never know. You know what I mean? You really just, like you said, you really just don't know what that comes with. It's just, I just encourage people just to put it out there. You know what I mean? As a creative, because there's such diversity within the diaspora. It's so much diversity within, the Islamic community and even just blackness in general. So, there's so many stories to be told, you know what I mean? You don't know who you touching, you know what I mean? Like you said, if it just hits the right places, I think you've done your job in that way.
Yeah. I just want to chime in on that too, just about
screenings. You know, one of the things, I know you said you did a community screening. One of the things that I did covered in the editing process, because I can't do it in the writing, but in the editing process, I curated a group of women that I wanted to watch the film, and that we would watch it together, and then that they would talk, and they would have little groups. And so I could kind of, before I finished up, I wanted to hear how it was landing, because I knew that it wasn't, you know, if you write something that, where there is laughter, that's like great, because if it lands and you can hear it. But if you write something that's like thought-provoking, then you have to sit down with people and kind of ask the questions. And so the community thing, I think I'll always try to keep that as a part of the process, is gathering, you know, a community. And I curated it specifically, like I want this person, and I was like, it was even too. I was like, okay, I want some black women of this age, not Muslim. Then I want some black girls, Muslim, of this age. Then I want some Muslim women who are not black, you know, and thinking about just like the diversity of it, and really the conversation was really dope. Yeah.
No, that's great. You're making me think of so thinking about, so this question of, I think Amir, you said this to the other question that we discussed, this idea of what's being greenlit. You know, so as someone who watches way too much TV, right? But also just watches a lot of things, you know, when it comes to sort of for my viewing, when a black Muslim does show up, whether it's a TV show or a film, there are these tropes, right? So like, there's like one of the ones I see most commonly is like the angry black Muslim pseudo-revolutionary, right? Who's really like the target of like, either they're there for comic relief or just as a point of ridicule, right? The late Cedric Robinson, who's a film and media scholar, he put me onto this film from the 70s called Putney Swope that had a character like this. And then most recently, Eddie Murphy kind of played something like this, right, in that You People film. And so I'm wondering, you know, and so I'm just a viewer, you know, I'm watching, I'm a cultural critic or whatever, but I'm wondering from your perspective, like how would you analyze, like what does the landscape look like when it comes to seeing, right, a black Muslim character, right? And how does that compare to either what you do or what you want to see out there?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a complex conversation, because, you know, the tropes are just historical, you know what I mean, depending on wherever, you know what I mean, you're adjusting it towards. For me, you know, I think for the most part, you know, I think about the first time I actually seen it, I would say was probably Sharif with Minister Society. And, you know, going back then, you know,
I grew up on that movie.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, I know that's a hood classic. You know what I mean? Like you said, it's the pseudo like revolutionary, but I think the thing that was always something that was interesting to me, especially as a young kid, I don't even know why I was watching that movie, but you know, there was like this sort of, I guess, softness to Sharif. You know what I'm saying? Because obviously, as part of like black masculinity, especially, you know what I mean, in poverty, you know what I mean, it's like this hard, just you know what I'm saying? And for my man, even though, you know, he was kind of like in that vein of just like, you know, the trope, he still kind of brought you down to earth a little bit to be like, hey, brother, like, just think different, move different, you know what I mean? I think it's like a power and like that ability of just being soft in a way, you know what I mean? Like, shout out to my OG Sean Peters, who's always around here too. He's like a master of that, you know what I mean? Like, he can tote that line of like, bruh, I'm from New York, I will still knock your teeth out, but also too, like, brother, I love you, you need a hug right now. You know what I mean? So it's a fine balance because like that's what you want to be able to put onto the screen and ultimately, you know what I mean, build more narratives around that. But you know, just the historical barriers of just like getting to that point, you know what I mean, is such a detriment, you know what I mean? And like, I remember like Holly Garima, he was in a panel here a couple years ago, and you know, he kind of just spoke like saying how people just like run up to him and be like, yo, I think they just think he loves film, you know what I mean? But he's like, I actually like hate it for how it's been used as a tool detrimentally to, you know what I mean, the people, you know what I mean? So it becomes a catch-22, and like I said, it's just a matter of just like, again, just put it out there, you know what I mean? And just also too, just be able to be willing to fight those battles, you know what I mean? Because it's a long, long way to go, you know what I mean? Like we just got Rami, like we just got Mo, you know what I mean? And like even that's still another part of it because it's still not addressing like the blackness of, you know what I mean, Islam. So like I said, I just know it's a battle.
Anybody else want to take that?
I mean, yeah, like, again, as far as with my film, I think, just capturing that sweet father, like, again, I have a daughter, and most of the other dads that also have a daughter, the daughter runs things. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, my daughter, she breaks my heart. And so that's a universal thing. That's a universal thing. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, or Muslim, Christian. And like, the sisters were sharing, it's just about the story. It's about the story first, and then you find out that you're doing something different. That people might see some relief, like, oh man, you didn't, follow the trope, things of that such. And so I think as long as, I can't write from that anyway, I can't, I just want to just tell a very authentic story, or really show a very complex relationship. And really, that's the beauty thing about filmmaking, is that we show the private parts of people's lives. You don't get to see arguments, when you see a husband and wife arguing in the film, it's like, oh man, I had that similar situation, but people don't get to see other people in their most private, intimate life. And as filmmakers, we had the blessing to create that.
Yeah, I'll jump in there, because I was going to say the interior life. That's what I feel like is missing. I feel like in the way that I write, I think, and Nijla probably similarly, is I'm starting from inside the character. And what you're saying about those conversations, things that are missing. I remember I had a student, not Muslim at all, but they're Latinx from the Los Angeles area, and I had them do a writing exercise where I asked them to, tonight is dinner time. What is your character doing? Go. It's like a free write. What are they doing? And so this particular student, she wrote how the husband would come home and he had all the bags and stuff, like the way that they packed the food. And the wife was like packing the food up for the week, and kind of how they worked in the kitchen and how they would pass one thing to the other, and how there was this kind of intimacy between them, and how they shared and moved space. And she was just describing it very like visually, because I'm always like, right, what you see, what you hear, what you see, what you hear, not what anyone is saying. And I just got chills listening to the way that she was describing this, because I'm like, nobody knows that but you. That's what you don't know. And I feel like that's what, even sometimes, best intentions, you'll see someone put a Muslim family on TV and they'll be eating dinner or something, and you're like, I don't know. It just feels like it's missing some interior. And I don't want to say what they would say, because there's many Muslim families, right? But it feels like there's nothing. Like, I don't know, I'm curious about the interior life of these characters. I feel like that's missing for black women as well. It also makes me think of also another sidebar, but I remember the moment it was on TV. It was Viola Davis. What's that show she was on? She had How to Get Away with Murder. There's a scene where she's sitting in the mirror at the table, and she takes a makeup wipe. She pulls off her wig. She takes a makeup wipe, wipes off her makeup. She peels off her lashes, and I was just getting chills. I like leaned in. I was like, this has never happened on television. Like, we've never seen this before. This is the interior life of all women. Like, what does this mean to peel everything back and be vulnerable and now ask this question? Of course, the question is not particularly deep in this show, because it's like, okay, is my husband cheating on me? Is he a murderer? But the point is, I'm peeling everything back and I'm raw. And I love that. And I know that there was, I recognized the writer, and I was cheering because I know that particular writer, Erica Green, shouts out. And I know that Viola Davis was behind saying she wanted to be able to take that wig off at some point in the show. So it's really the details of interior life that I feel like are missing. And I think that's probably in some of our works.
if you want to. Or?
Yeah, I wanted to just add, when I was trying to get my feature film Jen made, we would go to financiers and to people who could fund the film, and the way that they would talk about Islam was always in a very historic way, especially when it came to African Americans or Black Muslims. You know, they would mention, of course, Malcolm X or Muhammad Ali or the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, but there was no grasp of Islam or Black people in Islam in a contemporary world, like a Black Muslim teenager, or, and it was really interesting to me. So I think a lot of the tropes come out of that kind of historical fixation that we have around Islam, and especially around African Americans in Islam, and coming away from that to ground our stories in the present day is just like a really important movement. Sometimes I wonder, like I was watching the show Bel Air, and there's a character on there, Jazz, the new Jazz, he's Muslim, and it was a whole storyline, and I really wondered just like what our community thought of that, like the engagement. There's a show, Godfather of Harlem, that I watched that takes like a lot of artistic license with the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X, and I'm just like, what do we think? So sometimes I do wonder for the shows out there now in films, like I wonder, like what do we think about this?
Well, can I tell you what?
Interesting. Yeah, and then there's a character on Euphoria that Coleman Domingo plays, this a counselor who's like, in recovery, and he has the kufi cap on, and so I just watch these shows, and I'm like, they're coming from outside, and so I'm like, how are we engaging with that? It's really interesting.
Yeah. No, which leads to my other question. I will say this one thing about, and my husband makes fun of me, but like, so I have this thing, so people don't call it a hijab, right? I don't wear a hijab, right? That's not a term that I grew up using. And so it's funny, because in Godfather Harlem, she's calling her headscarf a hijab in like 1970. I'm like, dude, nobody was saying
Yeah, and I always want to talk to people about that show, because...
So anyway, but related to that, I'm wondering, I feel like since 9/11, right, there's this whole sort of a lot more interest, public conversation around Islam generally. Islam is also very not Black anymore, right, since 9/11. And I'm wondering about how that translates into sort of film, TV world in terms of getting things, funding for things greenlit. I'm wondering, because I feel like space has been open. Like there's a Rami, like you said, there's a Mo, right? But, there isn't a Jamal or whatever, so I'm wondering, like, what's your interpretation or evaluation, or like, has the space opening up in some ways for Muslims in these spaces, has it meant something for Black Muslim stories? Has it also opened up, or are they not looking for that? And so it's harder to do, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? So this is my question.
Nah, to be honest, no. It really hasn't done any type of headway, for the most part. I mean, I think Mo, Riz Ahmad, and Rami, they put together like a collective called Pillars, where they've been able to, find resources to fund, Islamic movies. But, that's off their own resources, Like, that's not coming from the studios, that's not coming from networks, Like, I'd be curious to know, like, how your pitch process was for Jen, because I can only imagine, those people that are giving you notes, like I said, just so far removed from that word, Yeah, like notes, Like, it's a real thing. And then, on the other side of it too, like, I don't know, like I said, I'll just say that I don't see that much headway, It's a lot of work for us to do on the ground level before we get to that point, but it's a long way to go,
You want to say?
Yeah, so making Jen, well, we had to make it independently, totally, because if we couldn't get any company to make it, and if we waited, it probably would have never got made. So we did it ourselves, got private equity investors, got grants, did grassroots campaigning, Kickstarter, just got people wanting to see the film, that built momentum to get the film made. And since then, I will say that I don't know that it has become better. I have another film called Noor that I've been trying to get made for over 10 years, a Black Muslim or a Muslim romance between a Black woman and an Arab man, and have faced so much just barriers to get that made even after Jen. And so it's discouraging, but then there's also the beauty of, I'm a part of a show called Swagger. It's on Apple TV+. The showrunner is Reggie Rock Bythewood, awesome person. And I was in the writer's room for that, also director for it. And he had two characters in that show, a father and a son, Coach Naeem and Musa, who are Black Muslims. And he really wanted me to help shape those characters. And I came in the writer's room to really add texture and really give those characters life. And I just think it's a beautiful representation of Black fatherhood, Black Muslims, and just a Black teenager who's a Muslim in a show. And so that's an example of, you have people like that who want to bring these stories out, and you work with them and it will happen. So if you get in that type of environment, yes, and they have the power to do that. But in other environments where they're just, I've been told, we're only looking for the action thriller, we're only looking for, this type of movie. They're not looking for anything related to what I'm doing. So it can be really hard. After everything that I've done, I'm still fighting to get these type of stories made within the Hollywood system.
Do you mean in terms of the action film? They're saying if it's a Muslim, it has to be an action film. It can't.
Well, no, they don't even.
Oh, they don't even.
Yeah, I mean, even my films that have no Muslims in it. I mean, it's like it's real. I really don't want to be the Debbie Downer, but I have really seen some things in the industry that are very disheartening, and I think it's really up to us here, to build our own community and do it, like BlackStar, just from the ground up and put our work out. Because if you're waiting for those people, we're on strike right now, those people don't even want to pay us. We're out there on the picket line. So sorry I get emotional, but it's just a really hard time right now, and it's up to us to really get our work out if we want to do it. So.
I've been watching a long time, and so I remember long before Rami and long before Mo and before Jen and before Muslim. And so I watched all of those things happen, and they were always wins to me. Like, it was a win to see your film made. I remember when you were fundraising for it, I heard about it. So it was a win. It was a win when Qasim's film, these things happened. And then I'm rooting for Rami, and then I got a student who writes on Rami, and so that's exciting. But before, there was nothing. And I remember having a round of meetings and things like that based on a script that I had written, and it definitely had Muslim theme and things like that in it. But I almost felt like those people they didn't even know that it was a Muslim, or they just, that part was just intriguing to them. Like, this is fascinating. And just thinking about how the industry was at the time, I got a lot of meetings, and I thought that I was excited. Like, I'm gonna make the movie. They wanna make the movie, and it's like, no, they're just interested. Yeah. They're just interested. And they're like, you're interesting. Tell us, I wanna know who you are and why this script is amazing. They're never gonna make it, but they're interested. And it was like, and that took years for me to realize, these people are never gonna make this movie. It's not gonna happen until it pops up later in somebody else's thing. But never mind that. But so there was a fascination with Black, Muslim, magical realism with genre, pre-Jordan Peele, there was a fascination, but no one was willing to make a move on it. So I feel like we are in an up and down period, because I said, well, all those things were wins. And now, as we're moving away from the George Floyd moment, it's feeling like, okay, maybe we're not so interested. But what it comes back to is making the independent work. But why we're here, it's back to to the echoes of Haile's voice in my head about, sister, you have to make your film. Like, who are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? So I think ultimately it comes back to us kind of taking control of our narrative and figuring out how to get our stories told. Yeah.
No, thank you. Oh, yeah, go, no,
And two, like organizations that have been so helpful in doing this, the Islamic Scholarship Fund, they give grants to Muslim filmmakers to get your films made. I got a grant from them. So yeah, just wanted to.
No, that's great. I feel like I should make one correction. Pillars Fund is it's a fund, and so Riz works with the fund, but they didn't create Pillars.
Gotcha,
So just for the record,
My bad.
that's just for the record. But they were part of something that they've done this because I was a part of this Muslim narrative change thing they pulled together, and then they had this fellowship where they sort of gave money to sort of aspiring screenwriters, things like that. So it's definitely all connected. But yeah, I think let me check our time. Okay, so I'm going to ask one last question, then we're going to open it up to the audience. So on your point about independence, boo capitalism. But anyway, on your point of independence, I was wondering so I wanted to end on that note in terms of what should we be watching, right? Whether it's something you got coming out or something you've seen, right? As it comes to our topic, right? Black Muslims on screen, right? Give us, your recommendations. Or what should be made if it's not being made. If it's not already out there, put in, maybe there's some aspiring folks out here who want to, create something.
I wouldn't say it's like correlated to, the Muslim community, but I definitely would have more people support Random Acts of Flatness. You know what I mean? 100%. Just in terms of just like being authentic and real to the Black experience. You know what I mean? Like that show needs way more love than what it's got. And also, I would say the same thing for what was a limited series, but Small Acts on Amazon. Steve McQueen. Oh, yeah. I think that was just like the best way of intimately telling a story specific to the culture. And like you said, nobody else could have told that story because that's a true experience. You know what I mean? So I know I said, but we got a lot more work to do on that front. But that was just some small examples.
I will say I'm just gonna hype up my show Swagger because it's a good show and it just will make you feel good. If you just want good, not even wholesome, but you can watch it with your family. It's love, it's family, it's basketball in a way that you haven't seen basketball filmed. There are Black Muslim characters in the show, and I think that show really has embodied for me what we need in this industry. The creators of the show really brought so many people in and broke down some doors. So just, Swagger on Apple TV.
Yeah, I was on, the new app Spill? When the season started, they're all like, everyone's like, live. Yeah.
People, it really has found its audience this season, especially season 2. Yeah.
You want to share Yucef for the show?
I think you should just hunt down the good works. There's no reason we can't go back and watch Random Acts. There's no reason we can't go back and watch Small Acts. There's no reason, or when we hear that there's a writer, because what I'm thinking for it's not Fresh Prince, what is it, Bel Air now? So I'm thinking when we're talking about jazz, I'm like, okay, why isn't Nijla on directing an episode on, or myself, or why, so when there is a show where they bring in you to write and to direct, then I think we have to listen out for, okay, where are those Muslim voices and how are they showing up on different television shows, different movies? And just keep going back through the crates though, because there are filmmakers who have made stuff before. The works exist, we need to still keep pulling them out. Yeah.
Which is something for us, for people who aren't filmmakers but who are audiences, right? We also have to do work, right? So it's not just enough to sort of sit back and wait for it to come, but to think about who wrote that episode, right? What's going on here, So I think that's also something that we can do as well as audiences. So I think, are we ready? Right? So, go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, can you all hear me with my mask on and everything? Okay. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Arya. Thank you all so much. First of all, I just want to say that this was so enriching because, as you said earlier, Doc, like the intersection of being Muslim, the intersection of being Black, and the intersection of being a creative, this is my first time at something like this. So thank you for that. I have a bit of a two-part question for you all. So similar to you, sis, I found Islam later in life, at the end of my university career specifically. And, you know, I'd always known myself as a Caribbean woman. I'd known myself as a Black woman. I'd known myself as a creative prior to that. But in trying to find who I am as a Muslim, it seems like folks' favorite word to use with me was haram. You know, this is haram, that's sinful, astaghfirullah, you know, all these types of things. And I'm just like, okay, that created so much anxiety in me as a human being, but then even now as an actor, as a creative, I'm like, how do I navigate this? So I was wondering if that was something that y'all could empathize with, and if you had any words of wisdom or advice as far as that's concerned. And my second question is, are there opportunities to connect with y'all, being an actor, being a creative, and how should I best go about doing that? Thank you.
I'm actually, so I work for Express Newark, which is arts and media, and we actually do community history projects, and we did this thing called Muslim Voices of Newark. We partner with Scribe Video Center here in Philly. They did Muslim Voices of Philadelphia. And that was one of this a filmmaker named Hafiz Fareed. And, you know, old school brother, grew up in the Nation of Islam, and, you know, and converted when Wallace D. Muhammad had, you know, changed into Orthodox Islam. But he talked about how back in the day, you know, Nation of Islam, they had the bazaars, and that the arts is economic development for, you know, the African American community. And there's this, this how he described it, that there's this Arabized situation that's happening with our community. And so like, you know, and that's what we're, you know, with our Muslim Voices in Newark, you know, we're funding about 4 projects, local projects from the Muslim community to create their own film. We'll teach them filmmaking, but it's to, you know, it's to ignite the community, and to hopefully, because the community is sort of scattered, there's gentrification going on in some of the mosques and things of that such, and so, but we, you know, as he said it, like, they want to get it back to how it was back in the day, you know, because what the Nation of Islam did do, it's just create this strong, you know, community, and it was just a lot of, you know, arts. They had a lot of art programs and things like that such, and it was celebrated within the Muslim community, and so just keep on, you know, that's my encouragement. Just keep on doing what you got to do.
I relate to that. You know, I remember being and it was a long time ago now, but being a very young, new Muslim, being so excited. And then then comes the Muslim police, you know, where it's like, sister, you know, your hijab, your hair, your eyebrows, your lipstick, your nails, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, that's not what I came for. And specifically for me, and I can't speak for anybody else, is that when I reverted or when I embraced Islam, it felt like a continuation of my spiritual journey. So I grew up very Christian, deep Christian roots, down south, roots that I'm proud of, you know, roots that, you know, I grew up in the church, on the usher board, on the YPD, you know, like an AME. So all of that comes with me. This also resonates with me, and this is the continuation of my practice. And so my work, I think, as an artist, it's about reflecting what is true to me. So it's my truth, it's my stories, and I'm pulling from all of that. I'm pulling from all of those stories, my grandmother's story. I'm pulling from my in-laws' stories. I'm pulling from people I see in the community. I'm so inspired. I want to know, you know, I remember there was a period of time in my particular masjid where things were changing, and someone decided that we should have a barrier in the mosque, and no barrier had existed prior to that. And a lot of the older African American sisters were like not really feeling it, but people were quiet about it. And I remember just kind of sitting there really like frozen, because I was young and I didn't really know what to do, but I was in my head, I'm like, I'm not feeling this. And I remember this older sister got up one Friday, took it down, just snatched it down. And I'm like, I want to tell her story. And I don't know how that's going to manifest one day, but it's just something that lives within me. And so I feel like it's the truth, whatever the truth is to you. And none of us are perfect. And that's the other thing. I feel like the longer I've been Muslim, right? And it's been, I don't know, 27 years now. So the longer, and I say that because it's like, no, it's been a journey. The longer I've been Muslim, the more I embrace the wide world ummah and all the different people I've met on the spectrum of Islam, then the spectrum of their practice, some people practicing, some people kind of not practicing. Like, there's a wide range. I have friends who are, their parents are immigrants from Indonesia. One is Christian, one is Muslim. I have another friend whose parents are from Kashmir. They're very Muslim, very practicing. She's a professor. The more you broaden it, then I think you start to feel comfortable, like, oh, there's a space for me to be in my own truth and space. And then your artistry will reflect that as well. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hello, and thank you all. My question is, from a lot of what I heard today, there was a big cultural and sociological perspective about the people that are Muslim and practice that faith. What do you all think about a space in film that talks about Allah or God and how it affects people through these different religions and faiths? And also, as an example, maybe, what do you think about Belly and the change that DMX's character, I'm sorry the name's escaping me right now, what he goes through? And what does that say also about Allah and about his role in man's life?
I mean, I'll touch on that because that's pretty much my journey in a nutshell, at least in terms of my relation, to religion and spirituality, Like, the most out of me is energy, And for the most part, that energy comes through the experiences, the people that I meet, And from there, I kind of decipher the truth in terms of just like how I continue to maneuver through life, I think, I think Yaya kind of said it, like, a lot of people scared to talk about God, For whatever reason, that's still something that's a little bit taboo. But for the most part, I just think we all go through it, It's a reason why, you visit the mosque or you visit in church, wherever, daily, Because faith is a big part of life, Getting to that point where that becomes a story, Like, it's powerful, It's just necessary for the most part, but I don't know if we've ever seen that thus far or yet. So, I think I encourage you, if that's a story that you want to tell, to do that, for the most part, because I think it's more familiar than people think, So, yeah.
I mean, you didn't ask me, but I could say something as a viewer. I think it's interesting because I'm thinking of that show that was on OWN, the Love show.
Love Is,
right? And I'm thinking about, like, there was this one scene, right, where the character, he like goes into like, they're like in a parking lot at night, and he goes into the grocery store and brings out this jug of water. And because I'm the Muslim whisperer, I'm like, oh, he's about to make wudu because he's about to pray, right? And that's what he was doing. And so your question reminded me of that, because it wasn't like this super like, the manna from, like it was coming down, but it was like this very thing. And he wasn't a good, he had issues, right, as a person and as a Muslim, right? But like he prayed. And so we saw it on the screen in these ways that like were not super like,
it wasn't like PSA, it wasn't, right. But it was very real, and it was very, and Azim was, I was like, oh yeah, so yeah, yeah.
No, I wanted to say, everyone's relationship with God is personal, and I think sometimes when you're trying to put that on screen, you might fear judgment, or you might fear that people don't understand. Because even in my film, you have characters who are so moved to tears by, speaking to God and by prayer. And, that is something that's so personal. And I feel like you just said, if we can just make an open space for people to bring their personal relationships with spirituality and God into the center, I think we would see more of it. Because I think sometimes people are like, if I don't show them doing this and praying like this and her scarf was off or something, people get scared and then they don't even explore it. But I just feel like openness is really needed if we want to see more of those stories.
So our time is up. Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.
And thank you to the panelists so much. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.